Hey everyone, it's Matthew, and today I'm starting a new series. It's called Baking the Basics. So, I'm going to be teaching you how to make all of the basic baked goods, and we are starting with the notoriously difficult French macarons. So, I'm actually pretty familiar with these cookies. If you watched me on the Kids Baking Championship Season 2, I won the Macaron episode.
And that baker is Matthew. Yes! I'm the Macaron Man!
So that's kind of how I got started with these cookies. And I will be teaching you how to make the beginner's recipe. So there's many recipes for French macarons, but to learn, I find that the best way to do it is just mix together the sugar and the almond flour and fold it into the meringue instead of doing an Italian meringue. Honestly, they're just as good. It's perfect for just getting to learn. So let's get started. Okay, before we start, I think we have to talk about what macarons are. Macarons are French sandwich cookies, and they have a cracked edge around the side called a foot. That is the mark of a true macaron. If a macaron doesn't have a foot, it's not a macaron. So the first thing we're going to do is mix together the almond flour and the powdered sugar. Almond flour is basically just ground up almonds, and we're going to whisk that together just so that it's there's no lumps, and then we're going to sift it through a sieve. If you don't have one of these, I definitely recommend buying one so that your macaroons don't come out lumpy, because if you don't sift it, then some of the big chunks don't separate. We are going to beat the egg whites. We're going to beat them until they get frothy. So when we are beating the egg whites, what's happening is the protein strands in the egg whites are getting super thin, and it's causing the mixture to fluff up. So that's going to be important because we don't want to deflate all of that air that we've added in later. It should look like a bit like a bubble bath, and then we're going to add the sugar very gradually, about a few teaspoons at a time, and once it starts to get to one homogeneous white color, we're going to add in the red food coloring and keep gradually adding in the sugar. So, you may be wondering, how will I know when I'm done whipping the egg whites? So, you're supposed to be done when your eggs get to stiff peaks. Stiff peaks are basically when you can swirl around the egg whites on the whisk attachment, and it comes out with something that looks like a bird's beak that's really stiff. If you get sort of a droopier look, then it's soft peaks or medium peaks, and you want to keep whisking it. But be careful not to over whisk it, because you definitely don't want to do that. You'll have to restart, and it's just a mess. You'll know when your egg whites are done when you can lift the bowl over your head and nothing will fall out. So we're going to add a half of the powdered sugar mixture first, and you're just going to want to stir it in. You don't have to be too careful about the first incorporation, but then when you add the second half of the powdered sugar mixture, you're going to want to fold it. So what that means is that you scrape through the bottom of the bowl and you stir it very carefully. We've just beaten a ton of air into the egg white. If you don't fold the egg whites, then you're going to lose all of that air and you're going to overmix your macarons. If you undermix your batter, then your macarons will rise too much and explode on the top, and they won't even be true macarons. The feet won't form, and it'll just be a bad situation. But if you overmix your batter, then the macarons will spread super thin, and the feet won't puff up, and you'll have these weird, flat, wrinkled macarons that you definitely don't want. So, you'll know when you're done mixing when the batter falls off of your spatula like molten lava. So, this basically means that when you lift up the spatula and pour it out back into the bowl, it'll form little ribbons. basically, the correct way to pipe macaroons is to have your non-dominant hand on top of your dominant hand. Your non-dominant hand should be just there for support, while your dominant hand is squeezing. Your dominant hand should be at the top of the batter, because you don't want to squeeze in the middle of the bag, or else it'll cause air to form and the batter won't come out evenly. So you definitely want to make sure you're squeezing from the top of the batter. So the next important step is to bang your macaron trays on the table. Just smack them down, because that is going to get the excess air bubbles outside of the macarons. So there's already a ton of air bubbles inside, but now we want to get those out, or else your macarons may crack on top and they won't be as smooth, and it would just be a bad situation. So just smack the trays on the tables and you'll see that the air bubbles will come out the top. So next, you're going to let your macarons dry for 30 minutes. What this is going to do is it's going to create an outer shell outside of the macarons with the dried egg whites, and it's going to ensure that your macarons don't crack on top and that they rise and have the perfect feet. So now I'm just going to whip up a buttercream. I'm just going to eyeball it personally, because that's just what's easiest for me. But the basic proportions are 1 stick of butter to 2 cups of powdered sugar with about 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And that is my vanilla frost. We use buttercream to make a ring around the macarons. I pipe a very thin ring around the edges of the macarons to hold the jam, because if you don't do that, the jam will seep out of the sides and it'll be a really sticky situation that you definitely don't want. So there we have it, the perfect macarons. The perfect macaron has a very flat top, thin feet, which is basically the cracked edge around the side. It's like a crown of the macarons. You really need those to have a true macaron. And it has to be crispy on the outside and chewy in the middle.